Guess who rolled out of bed this morning not super excited to talk about The Legend of Zelda 2? Yeah, that's me. The Adventure of Link is known as the black sheep of the Zelda franchise, and you're gonna see why in a minute. This game is wildly different from the rest, so I think reviewing it should still be interesting, especially comparing it to the rest of the franchise. This game only took 11 months to develop, and was the shortest release time between original Zeldas. It's kind of funny seeing it go from less than a year to over 6 years now. Oh my goodness. But either way, I think that this will be an interesting one to review, so make sure to stay tuned. So The Legend of Zelda 2 basically puts you right into the story right away. No prologue, nothing. You're just automatically at the princess's bed, and now you have to go rescue her, I guess. This game's story is a little bit more confusing than the first one, and having to have a manual to understand it is frustrating, I guess, but also it kind of makes sense given how games were back then. I guess I won't judge. And the gameplay right away is really fun. In fact, a lot of people that defend this game really haven't gotten more than 15 minutes into it. I mean, all the way up to the first dungeon, it's a ton of fun going through this game. The combat is entertaining, the XP system at first is alright, and I was enjoying myself. And then the game started to get really difficult, and I was less enjoying myself. See, this game has some of the most difficult combat of any game of all time. And I'm not stating that as a, wow, this game is super difficult. I'm stating that as a literal fact that even IGN said. So, yeah, this game's really difficult. And I've said before, I'm not super great at video games. And while I was able to get through this one, it was extreme at times. And I will say that while I like the XP system at first, it becomes really hard to level up at certain points, and dying so often because of that was definitely frustrating, or having to wait around to try and get a fairy. And also this game has the problem of not really knowing where I'm supposed to go. See, one of my problems with 80s RPGs and 90s RPGs leading up to, I guess, Final Fantasy VII, is that you really have no idea where you're supposed to go. You have this giant open world that seems super exciting, and then you don't really know where you're supposed to go in it. Now, the first two dungeons were pretty easy to find, and this game was a little less confusing than games from that era, but man, this is one of my least favorite styles of gameplay, is just looking around forever to try and see where you have to go. And well, I know a lot of people complain about that with, say, Breath of the Wild. The difference is Breath of the Wild has a point system that literally points you in the direction of where you're supposed to go. And the fact that these games from the 80s didn't have that was a major problem. And while I understand why they couldn't have that, I mean, having a simple map system shouldn't have necessarily been difficult. But hey, maybe that's just me. But similar to the first game, this game's dungeons are spread out and, again, hard to find. In the first game, I mean, I thought it was funny looking through the walkthrough. This game, I thought it was a little bit more annoying. And honestly, maybe that's because most of this game is just combat. The puzzles of the past and future aren't really present in this one, and this game is more confusing in where am I supposed to go and less what am I supposed to do. And honestly, that's not really what I like to see from a Zelda game. And yeah, I get it. This game was trying a completely different style of gameplay, and while that gameplay was still fun, the problem with this game compared to the first game is that this one is far less iconic, and that is for a major reason, because this gameplay style would never be attempted again by the Legend of Zelda series. And well, yeah, I had my fun with this game. It was very challenging, and at times, just needlessly annoying, I guess. This game also felt like it overstayed its welcome, similar to the first game, and I don't know, I just had less fun with this one, I suppose. I mean, I can maybe see it more as a modern game, which is probably why I'm a bit more harsh on it. With the first Zelda, I was able to defend it because, I mean, it came out in 1986, and while this only came out a year later, I don't know, I just had less of a time I guess, trying to defend this one, and more of a time feeling like this game kinda sucks. It's known as the Black Sheep for a reason. Some people will love it, most people will hate it. And honestly, that's perfectly fine. Zelda 2's biggest legacy is that it was a sequel to the first game, and really not much more than that. But the games after it definitely picked up the pace, and while this one still was a step, it wasn't a huge step. But we'll see that step soon enough with A Link to the Past. So in the meantime, unfortunately, I will have to give The Legend of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link a 4 out of 10.